Hi, everybody. It's Alice Heiman. Happy International Women's Day. I'm excited because the Gartner research on the state of gender diversity has just been released, and I thought this would be the perfect day to share it. And I got lucky enough to snag some of Christina's time to talk about it with me. Hi, Cristina.
Hi, Alice. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you're in your office today. Where are you?
I am. I'm in my office. You can see my children's artwork proudly displayed in the background.
I love that. That's beautiful. So, gosh, I know you're super busy, so I'm glad that we took a few minutes here and you were able to get on the call with me to talk about this. In case all of you don't know Cristina Gomez, she's the managing vice president at Gartner, and she has been integrally involved with this research. So I can't wait to hear what you've got to say, but would you just do us a favor and briefly explain what Gartner does and, just in general, and then why they chose to do this research?
Sure. Gartner is a leading research and advisory firm. So my team focuses on creating must-have insights, advice, tools to help sales leaders, commercial leaders, complete their mission-critical priorities. And as you know, closing the gender gap in sales is one of those. So I'm very happy to talk about it today.
Great. And if you don't follow Gartner, I highly recommend, especially if you're in sales or marketing, which of course I am, that you follow Gartner for Sales and Gartner for Marketing on LinkedIn because they post so much great information. So let's dig into some of the findings. I've got my report here, and it's all, tabbed of the things that I really enjoyed learning about. But let's start with this. Is the situation improving? Is that gender gap closing? Or, what's really going on there?
Yeah, I would say the situation has improved in some areas and it remains unimpressive in others. When we look at the data, we still find that there is a large gap percentage-wise in terms of women participation in all levels of the organization, whether it is early career, middle management, and especially sales leadership. So what I would say is we see a lot of excitement about the topic, and we see a lot of organizations starting to chip away with diversity and inclusion initiatives, but the participation remains, I think, disappointing.
Yeah, I feel that, all of the people in the sales world and marketing world that I communicate with can feel that. And we're looking around and seeing that there's some improvement, but we're still, especially in sales, saying where are the women, especially in the sales leadership area, which we'll get to in a minute. But what do you think the biggest obstacle is to closing the gender gap in sales and sales leadership in particular?
Yeah, this report, I think, highlights something that is critically important, which is that it is difficult to address a problem that you can't see. And one of the things that was sort of a revelation to me, frankly, in this report is that we asked, I believe it was over 100 heads of sales, what is the state of diversity? How satisfied are they with the state of diversity in their sales organization? And a staggering 84% said that they were either very satisfied, absolutely satisfied, or satisfied with the state of their gender diversity. And that to me was very, very surprising, frankly. And then I thought about it a lot as I was sort of looking through this data with my team, and then I realized, the vast majority of this heads of sales, truly CSO or C-level equivalents, are male. And so it is not so surprising to me that when they look at the state of the world, they're very satisfied because, frankly, they probably are already putting a lot of effort and a lot of time and initiative to close the gender gap. But the reality, when you look at the voice of the both women and men sellers in those organizations, is different.
It's a matter of perspective, isn't it? So you have these male sales leaders, mostly male sales leaders, especially in the C level, and they're looking at it going, wow, we have improved it. We do have more women. So it's more than it used to be. And they probably, like you said, are putting a lot of effort into trying to hire and retain women, and then also rise them up through the ranks to sales leadership. But it's still such a small percentage. So if they don't recognize that there's still a problem, it's going to be hard to fix it. I mean, that's really the first piece, right? We have to recognize it. So it's interesting that that was the finding. You said 84% were satisfied with the diversity. So interesting. Wow. So there's, you know, really very real gap in how male and female sales executives perceive culture and structural barriers to women advancing, right? So what are you seeing? What are some of those that got reported in the findings, these barriers?
Yeah, I think that the first one that I sort of immediately think about is we asked them, do you agree or disagree that your self-organization has a male-dominated culture? And obviously, it's sort of in the eyes of the respondent how they interpret a male-dominated culture, but you can think of lots of different things, from incentives to non-rewards, not compensation rewards, to threats, how they think about flexible work arrangements, et cetera. And what we find is that only about 50%, 51% of male respondents think that their organization is has a male-dominated culture, compared to 74% of female respondents. So you can just see, number one, half of your, you know, my message to heads of sales would be, gosh, 50% of your male sellers believe that you have a male-dominated culture. But wow, 74% of the female leaders think that, and that to me is a very staggering difference. We also asked them about whether they perceive that male and women have the same opportunities for advancement, and there we saw a significant difference as well. We also asked them whether they perceive that they have equal opportunity to resources and access, and we saw, again, a huge gap. And then finally, we asked them about not monetary rewards and whether they equally appeal to men and women. Again, we saw a very staggering difference between how male and female perceive those. So again, a gap, and I think we could argue whether the gap is in perception or in reality, but there is a gap.
Yeah, definitely, I believe it's perception and reality, both. But, you know, if you just take a look historically at corporate America and how it sprung up and how it's grown and evolved, and there were so many male leaders for so long without any look at diversity and inclusion. And of course, you know, traditionally the males being the earner or perceived earner, right? That our cultures did grow up around that. And that's kind of well seated and hard to break, right? Because it's been there a long time. So in order to change culture, we're going to have to really look at it, all agree that it needs to be changed, determine what the changes should be, and then consciously make an effort to do it. But when people have been doing something for a very long time the same way, this is not easy. So that consciousness about it and everybody agreeing to go forward to do it should start to help. But organizations need to talk about it. That's the only way it's going to change, right? We got to get out there and talk about these differences. So having the findings pointing it out so clearly should help the leaders understand that there still is a gap, whether it's real or perceived, it's still there, and they're going to have to take some action around it. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I think that everybody, not everybody, but most companies are very interested in diversity and inclusion efforts. You know, they put it out on their websites, they talk about it, they've got initiatives towards it. Some of the largest companies in the world have really made some big efforts towards diversity and inclusion and making sure there's no gaps in the pay based on gender, and really working hard to hire in all areas, not just sales. But if we, you know, really want to create some lasting change and really build this pipeline for sales and sales leadership, you know, amongst all this pressure, what do you see companies having to do?
I think that in the report we talk about two things. I think there's a lot that can be done from the top. So for sales leaders to really critically ask themselves some questions around when was the last time that they audited their compensation practices for gender bias? When was the last time that they really had a difficult conversation with the HR partners to talk about recruiting practices and whether or not hiring managers have biases in their hiring practices? The last time that they really critically examined their competencies, even from low-hanging fruit like job postings. Like, are they critically looking at the job postings and seeing whether the language is equally attractive to men and women, right? So I think there's things that the CSOs can drive from the top, but I also firmly believe that this is also a change that is going to have to come from market pressures. I think that, you know, in a lot of the data, we see that while there's a gap in male and female respondents, the gap is closing. And the reason why it's closing is because I think men are more sensitized to this topic. I think millennial and younger generations entering the workforce care about diversity. They care about their companies caring about diversity. And as those groups move up the chain of command, they will put pressure on CSOs to care about this more. And as buying groups, Gartner has done a lot of research on the changing nature of buying dynamics today. And one of the biggest trends that we see is buying groups becoming more diverse, yes, bigger. And as this happens, buying groups are going to put pressure on companies to go to market with diverse sales teams. And so I think that it will be a combination of modeling from the top and taking some smart action, as well as pressure from the market that creates enough of an incentive for organizations to do some of the things that they need to do, which will have long-lasting effects, but that will take time to build. Changing culture is something that takes time to change.
It does take time, and it does have to come from the top and from the bottom. But for those who are listening who may not be in charge of anything, but very interested in this topic, sure, what are a couple of things that I could do with my clients, or that any sales rep, male or female, could do to help their company just become more aware, just be part of the solution rather than part of the problem?
Yeah, so love the question. I think number one is awareness, right? Help us spread the word. I think that is an important topic. We want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is a problem, right? We got to open the eyes of everybody who is in a position to drive the change. I mentioned a couple other things, but we did some testing of how many companies are enacting some of these very helpful D&I initiatives, and you'll be surprised that only a small percentage of companies really have things like, for example, cohorts for working women returning to work, cohorts for female sales leaders, mentors. Mentoring programs and buddy programs are hugely popular and have an impact, and only a few organizations are taking advantage of that. Auditing, putting pressure on your leaders to audit your recruiting practices, interview guides, job postings. I think that makes a big difference. What else? Compensation is another really big one. So making sure that you're working with your HR and legal partners to audit your compensation practices and make sure they're equally, you're removing any gender bias from those practices as well.
Yeah, and I think that men and women alike can just join together in small groups, mastermind groups to just talk about the topic and see what they can do internally. So it doesn't have to be some big official thing. Get together and have a lunch and learn, or just a small group coffee talk over it, or just an ongoing small group conversation about what you personally can do and as a group can do to help impact your organization's culture, and to come forward and talk to your leaders as a group versus individually, because that's a lot stronger. So gosh, Cristina, I so appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know that you don't often get on and do the interviews, because I know you're behind the scenes making all the research happen, but this was just such a great opportunity on International Women's Day with this report coming out. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I am so thankful that you were able to talk with me about it today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the time. It is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm really appreciative of you helping me get the word out.
And so how can people get more on this report? Is there a place where it's posted, or how can they get some more information?
Yeah, we're gonna put a Gartner Pulse link on this video. So if you're interested in this topic, please click on it and read more information about it, how you can get access to the full report.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you to share in the comments what you're personally doing and what your company is doing to change the culture, just to have a culture of more diversity and inclusion, and making people feel comfortable in the workplace and able to learn and grow together and advance. So thanks, everybody. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Happy International Women's Day.